Today's speaker, Seth Stein, is William Deering Professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences and Faculty Associate of the Institute for Policy Research at Northwestern University. He holds a bachelor's degree from MIT and a PhD from Caltech. His list of awards is longer than both of my arms put together. True. He started Northwestern's environmental science program and has authored more than 200 scientific publications. His research is in plate tectonics, earthquake seismology, and earthquake hazards. Today, he's taking us on a fascinating journey to the biggest island on the biggest lake in the world. Please welcome to the Tuesday Club, Professor Seth Stein.
Well, thank you. It's everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Just make sure the sound's working. Okay, good. We've and university faculties, we've gotten pretty good at doing stuff on Zoom in the last few years, but you still always want to make sure that everything actually works the way it's supposed to. So let's start with that process of sharing the screen, and then we'll take it from there. Thumbs up if you can see the screen. If you can see the slides. Yes. Okay. Cool. All right. So, what I want to take you on a visit to today is Royale National Park, which is one of the least visited national parks in the national park system, although it's actually in many ways one of the neatest. And to do that, I want to tell you something about the park, and I want to tell you about the place. But telling you about the place involves telling you a bit about how it got there, because the real attraction there is the geology of the place, how it relates to the culture and the development of the Upper Great Lakes region. So we'll first talk a little bit about Isle Royale, then we'll talk about its setting in the Lake Superior and Lake Superior region, and then we'll go there and take 2 trips through Isle Royale. And I'm happy to answer questions as we go along or at the end, whatever people find more convenient. So this is a presentation grew out of one I did during the pandemic. I'm outings chair and trip leader for the local, that's the Woods and Wetlands group of the Illinois Sierra Club. And we shared slide presentations about some of our favorite places during those first year of the pandemic, when it was hard to go anywhere. And then since then, we've developed it some. So here's Isle Royale. For those of you who don't know where it is, it's more or less in the middle of Lake Superior. Lake Superior is by surface area the largest lake in the world, and this is the biggest island in the biggest lake in the world. There's actually a place here. This is the biggest lake in the biggest island in the biggest lake in the world, and this island here is the biggest island in the biggest lake in the biggest island in the biggest lake in the world. And we can go on from there, but we won't. Okay, so how do we get there? First, basically a couple of ways. From Chicago, the most direct is simply to drive north to the Keweenaw Peninsula. That's this peninsula. Here's the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Keweenaw is the peninsula that sticks into the lake. So Houghton, which is probably the town you're most likely to know of in the UP, is here. Tip of the peninsula is there. Both from Houghton and from Copper Harbor, there is ferry service during the warm seasons. Interesting enough, the park is completely closed during the winter. And that's for the sake of the animals, the wolves and the moose and so on that breed there. So you can get there from Minnesota's shore, from Grand Portage, and so we'll show you getting there by boat, and I'll also show you the most interesting way of getting there, although not the most expensive. Well, no, second most expensive is to take a seaplane that flies you out there, which is really, really cool. The most expensive, of course, is to get there in your own yacht, which many people do. It's a popular destination for recreational boaters, but you need a reasonable boat, and you need to know what you're doing, because Lake Superior is a very dangerous place. Okay, so here's the island. It's about 50 miles long, trends northeast to southwest. It is 99% wilderness. That means no roads, no cars, no cell phone service, no nothing. The 2 developed areas are this end. This is Rock Harbor, which has the only commercial lodging, and quasi-commercial lodging through a Park Service concession. Here at Rock Harbor, there's a visitor center, there's a store, there's a marina, and we'll see what that is, and a lodge. At the other end place you can get to is the Wendigo Visitor Center. It doesn't have any accommodations except a campground. And in the rest of the island, you're on your own, which makes it for a very, very impressive place. So what I'll do, let's talk a little bit about how this strange place got there. First, with some history. The island formed about 1.1 billion years ago. Probably every geologist in the Midwest has bought one of these shirts. You know, Isle Royale National Park established 1.1 billion years ago. We know that Native Americans were mining copper here, and that's an important part of the story, about 4,500 BC. It became part of the US after the Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution. I'll talk to you a little about that. Commercial fishing started there in early 1800s. And then, like the rest of the Lake Superior region, mining became an enormous industry. So the growth of the area for American settlement or European settlement, however you want to think about it, is largely due to the mining boom that started in about 1843. Tourism started about 1870, and it was made a national, it became a recreational area. There were hotels and things like that. And then through the efforts of some far-sighted people led by the Detroit News, it became a national park. And it's been there since 1931. So here's the interesting part of the story for me, because I like the place both. I like the Lake Superior area both as a place to go just on vacation because it's really pretty and there's neat stuff, but also because the geology is so interesting. And here's the interesting part. The geology is what shaped the area's growth and culture, because the geology gave rise to Lake Superior, and that became the basis of the area's water-based economy and history. It's still, Lake Superior is basically a big shipping lane even today, and fishing. The copper and building stone deposits produced the growth in the area. So for example, a lot of building stones, older building stones in the Loop were shipped from Lake Superior. And today the tourist industry is one of the big money makers. Now, Isle Royale is a really important part of that story. Let's talk about that a bit. Start with the Indians. Here's a map of which, of the different Indian nations that lived there. And these were concessions in which by various treaties, the US government acquired these lands. And so right now, and so there are still, the Reds are still the Indian reservations in the area for several of the Indian nations. Isle Royale does not have active Indian nations now, but it's recognized to be associated with the Chippewa bands of Indians. Now, what's interesting is the Indians not only mined copper there, that's what they were interested in, they shipped the stuff all over the Midwest. So the archaeologists who study Cahokia in downstate Illinois have found copper artifacts that were clearly transported as part of Indian trade all the way down to southern Illinois. So that's like 600 miles or something like that. It's very impressive. Okay, what happens? How does it get there? Let's condense the first quarter of geology into about 2 minutes. The Earth's surface is made up of what are called plates. Those are like the outer shell of the Earth. There's about a dozen major parts, like the North American plate, the South American plate. These plates move relative to each other at a few inches a year, which is about the speed your fingernails grow. And so all the geology that we see on the surface of the Earth is produced by these guys moving around at about the rate your fingernails grow. So things you see, like the San Andreas Fault, is the boundary between the Pacific and North American plates, so on and so forth. How does that work? Well, there's kind of an amazing cycle. How did Native Americans get there? Good question. They got there by boat. They didn't have seaplanes, but they got there by boat. They were pretty good with boats.
Seth?
Yeah.
Hey, Seth. This is Ron, and we're going to conduct Q&A after you have your presentation.
Okay.
So I just don't want you to get derailed. Go ahead, please.
Fine. I'll pick up this stuff later. Okay. Just put them there. How's this story work? Well, we have continents and they break apart. Like right now, Africa is splitting up into two plates along the East African Rift. Then a new ocean basin opens up between those two parts as this after the continent rifts and splits. New ocean forms. Ocean gets bigger. Eventually, that ocean gets squeezed out and the continents collide, like is happening in the Himalayas now. India is colliding with Eurasia. So this process of continents growing and shrinking goes on over time. And that produced something in the middle of North America, which is this amazing structure that makes all the geology of Lake Superior. When you go up to Lake Superior, it just plain looks different than, let's say, Chicago area. You know, we have this flat stuff there. They have big rock cliffs all around the place. Those are part of something called the Mid-Continent Rift. It's 2,000 miles long, and it's these blobs here that are circled in black. What happened is this about 1.1 billion years ago, North America tried to split apart along this boundary, but it didn't quite make it. So North America stayed together, but all these areas here are volcanic rocks that were deposited when North America tried to split. These rocks are volcanic rocks, so they are denser and they are magnetized. So even though we can only see them on the surface around Lake Superior, by measuring gravity very precisely all over the Midwest, and by looking at the magnetism all over the Midwest, we can map out this structure. The nice thing with Isle Royale is it's one of the best places to see the things. Part of this process produced the copper deposits. And so the copper deposits are what drove the European settlement to this area. I mean, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is pretty remote. The Keweenaw is remote even by the standards of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, but yet a lot of people were there in the 1800s. And interestingly enough, that rift also controls where Lake Superior is today. How does continent rift apart? This is a pretty good analogy. You take a candy bar and you try to pull it apart, and you can see it kind of contracts in the middle and it stretches. So that's what happened to the Earth's crust when Lake Superior opened up. We can image that process using the same technologies we use to look for oil and gas deposits. Here's a cartoon of how that works. Here's a boat towing a seismic source. It sends blasts of sound down through the water. Those go down into the rock. They bounce off various rock layers and are picked up by sensitive receivers, what amounts to very sensitive microphones being hauled behind the ship. From that, we can make maps of the subsurface. So here's a map of the subsurface going across Lake Superior from south to north. It's a huge rift, a huge basin, about 20 miles deep. It's full of basaltic volcanic rocks. And then on top of that are deposited all kinds of sediments. Okay, Isle Royale is on this side of it, so we'll see that. Quick summary, again, as part of this is a 30-second summary of 2 weeks worth of geology. Basalt is the black rock here. The important thing about it is it's got more iron and magnesium, and the continents are typically made up of granite, this white stuff, more silicon, oxygen. Basalt is dense, which is why we can map it with the gravity maps, and because it has iron in it, we can map it with magnetic methods. So let's try to figure out what this would look like today. Well, today, the East African Rift is splitting Africa up into 2 parts. This part here we call Nubia, this part we call Somalia. If you go down it, these are the great rift lakes of Africa, like Lake Victoria and Lake Tanganyika and such. And you see these huge basalt cliffs here. So the Upper Peninsula of Michigan would have looked like this 1.1 billion years ago, with a few minor differences. No trees, no animals, no zebras, no lions, no elephants, no none of them, because none of that stuff had evolved yet. So all you had was the rock. Even better, another way to see it is what would it look like today? Well, actually, if you had been there while the eruption was going on, it would have looked a lot like what you can see in Iceland today. So there's huge flows, red hot lava flowing down, slow, piling up big cliffs of the stuff. And when you go to Isle Royale, that's what you see. That's the point of all this for a visitor, is that's why the island is the way it is. And it seems kind of strange when you get there and if you don't know how it comes from. The island is basically a set of lava flows. They're tilted toward the lake, they're tilted south. And it's kind of like a deck of cards. Flow, 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 flow. The biggest flow is called the Greenstone Ridge, and that makes up the Greenstone Flow, and that makes up the Greenstone Ridge, which is like the spine of the island. The highest point is Mount Franklin. We'll see some pictures there. So when you get there, 99% or whatever the people get there come to Rock Harbor either by boat or by plane. That's here. And then you can hike along here, and we'll hike over the top of this and back to the other side. What's the funny here? When you're in a south-facing slope, it's a very gentle slope because you're hiking along the flow. The north-facing slopes are between the flows, and they are very steep. And you tend to get water in there and mud and bugs and whatnot. So as we walk through the island, you'll see the different flows. You know, you just becomes part of your life. It's normal. Here's a nice way to see them. This is a view from the seaplane coming in. This is Rock Harbor here. This is the Rock Harbor Lodge. We'll look at some pictures of that later. And you see these long ridges. The long ridges are the tops of these flows. How about the copper? How does it get there? Well, the thing with mineral deposits is this. The crust is full of minerals. They're everywhere. But they have to be concentrated enough to make it economically viable to mine them. That's very difficult for people to do. Nature can do that very, very well. Because rainwater, hot water rainwater gets into the rock. It leaches the minerals out of it because it's been heated up by the volcanic rocks. Then that water flows somewhere, cools off, and those areas become mineral deposits. So for example, here's a mine that was on the island. I'm walking by it here. That was active in historic times. So this was very primitive, almost hand sort of mining before modern mining technology. They took 200,000 tons of copper out of it. Copper was the driver for the Lake Superior boom. A couple of things. One of them is sheathing ships to keep them away from worms that would eat through wooden ships. Later on, as the telegraph developed, and then eventually the telephone, copper wire was the standard way of transmitting electric signals. So it's still one of the primary uses of copper. There's a bunch of other things you can do with it too, but that's the biggest one. So what happens? That was 1 billion years ago. Now let's go to geologically recent time, which is 20,000 years ago, about the age of the great ice ages. North American continent was covered by ice sheets. Eventually, those ice sheets melted back, leaving the moraines that we see. For example, the Highland Park moraine, the one that makes the ravines as you go up Sheridan Road. As you enter Winnetka, you start to rise from the south. You start to rise through this thing. That's one of these. It's one of these moraines left over sediment deposits as the ice melted back. But one of the interesting things is, as the ice came in, it exploited weaknesses in the rock. And in particular, the ice sheet up here near Lake Superior exploited the weakness of rocks associated with the Mid-Continent Rift. And that's why it has the shape that it is. Okay, so means we can find the Mid-Continent Rift all around the Midwest, all around Lake Superior in particular. That's where we can see it. Some interesting numbers here. It's the third largest freshwater lake by volume and the largest in terms of surface area. And it's kind of amazing. It's 300 miles long and 160 miles wide, and it can get to about 500 feet deep. So it's very impressive. So what we'll see, and then we're going to go to Isle Royale in particular, is as we go around Lake Superior, we see interesting kinds of rocks everywhere, and they're basically the same rocks that we see on Isle Royale. So this is Eagle Harbor at the upper peninsula of Michigan, close to where the boat leaves. These are the beautiful falls and parks along Minnesota's North Shore. Basically, when you go from Duluth north, you'll see these spectacular things. This is Interstate Park along the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. By the way, these two young ladies are our camera crew. We filmed a YouTube video that I'll give you a link to if you want afterwards. And they were both from Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern. And the video looks really professional. People say, gee, it looks like National Geographic made that. And I said, yeah. Well, one of the girls was a junior and the other was a first-year grad student at Medill, but they're just very professional. Okay, so Lake Superior became a huge transportation route very early on. So this is this is, where the fur traders used it, transport furs that they traded from the Indians, and they would transport them back along Lake Superior all the way back to places where they could be sold. So here's a canoe, here's some of the structures, very neat historical park that's worth visiting. And they have reenactors that go around in like costumes from the 1700s or something. In fact, it was so important that the border between the US and Canada was set on land by making it, quote, the customary route of the voyageurs, the fur traders. Now, of course, the negotiators in Paris had no idea where that actually was. None of the negotiators, either on our side or on the British side, knew where it was, but they agreed that it would be the voyager route. And they left us to sort it out where that would be. This is actually a funny story. This is, where that border should be. Should it be at Thunder Bay? Should it be more or less as far south, almost as far south as Duluth? And eventually this is what they settled on. Still a big shipping route today. This is the, for those of you who don't know, this is the port of Duluth. This is the bridge that boats enter the harbor there. These ships are like 600 feet long. These are amazing. These are amazing things. A lot of them are ore carriers carrying iron ore from the Iron Range in Minnesota. A lot of them are also grain carriers and so on. And so it's still a big shipping lane today. And of course, water recreation is a big part of the Lake Superior tourist experience. So here's some of us kayaking in Apostle Islands National Lakeshore, which is also a very cool place. How about getting there? Well, easiest way is get in your car and drive there. It's about 400 miles to get to Houghton from Chicago. If you want something fun to do on the drive or in preparing for the trip, Nevada Bar has two fantastic murder mysteries set in the park. The heroine is a park ranger, and they both involve sort of sinister goings on in each of the national parks. And I won't give away the plots except to say that they're really, really good. And my daughter, I would read these to my daughter on the drive. Well, we'd listen to them because, if you want a tough female character, our heroine, the heroine of these things, the park ranger, is as tough as they come. Sort of not quite a superhero, but close. This is about a summer in Isle Royale, and this is about the winter study where no one can stay there except some researchers who study the wolves and the moose. And of course, I don't think any of them have actually been murdered, but in the book, some of them get murdered. Okay, so let's talk about getting there. First, let's figure out how we get there by boat. This is from Copper Harbor. This is the Isle Royale Queen 4. So there's been 4 generations of this boat leaving. It seats about, I don't know, maybe 50 people. It takes about 3-4 hours to get there. This is what it looks like coming into the harbor. You see the beautiful basalt flows. This is what the marina looks like. This is my wife, Carol. We are here just at the end of the season. Things are about to shut down, so everything's kind of quiet. This is a marina, so people that have their own boats can come over from Duluth or Thunder Bay or Houghton if you want. But it is a big lake and it's a dangerous lake. This is the lodge where you can stay. These are dwelling units, and then there's a thing with a restaurant here. It's really kind of cool. It's at some level it looks like an ordinary motel, but every room has its own lake view. Every room has a great balcony for drying out stuff, and it's a very neat place. So from there, you can just day hike. This is my wife and I going up to one thing called Scoville Point. As always in Lake Superior, sometimes you have fairly lousy weather. Of course, I'm going to only show you pictures of nice sunny days. I also will show you pictures of days without lots of bugs driving everybody crazy. So we're here at the tip. This is one of these many peninsulas. Here we're up on one of the ridges. This is the Greenstone Ridge, the main ridge of the island. And you're looking down at the next one, the next flow over. The way we got here was kind of fun. We walked from our cabin, from the lodge, very close to a place where you could rent canoes. And then we canoed across one body of water. By canoeing across this, which took about 20 minutes, we saved about a 3-hour hike around it. And then we just landed the canoe, hiked up to the top of this, came back in the canoe and paddled back for showers and dinner. So these are the views from the ridges. Here's one of the historic mines showing what the miners looked like. It was pretty brutal, tough handwork there. So I will make an exception to the statement. I will show you a little bit of bad weather. The day we left was a more typical, was a Lake Superior day, cold, rainy, big winds. Everyone is huddled up waiting for the boat to come. The funny part is this, the people that had come on the seaplane, I'll show you how that works next. It's a half-hour flight rather than a several-hour boat ride. But the weather was so lousy that the seaplane couldn't land. So even though the people had paid for the seaplane, they ended up going back with us in the boat. I think they got their money back, or part of it back, but I don't know exactly how that works. But you can see Carol is all bundled up in her rain jacket. Everyone is sheltering under this thing. Eventually we get on the boat and everything is fine. It's comfy in that it's warm and dry. If you, on the other hand, you do feel the waves on the boat, and a lot of people are happy when the ride is over on a stormy day like this, but it's perfectly safe and perfectly nice. So this is the other way to get there. This is the one, you can afford it, I recommend it. You fly there from Houghton. So those of you who know the Upper Peninsula, this side of this canal here is called Houghton. This side here is called Hancock. They're twin towns. There's this big bridge that connects the two parts. And there's this river, which has been widened for canal. And a seaplanes take off from there. This is a classic bush plane. It's the most famous bush plane in the world. It's called the de Havilland Beaver. The Beaver seats about 8 people. They haven't been manufactured since 1967. But these things just keep on flying and flying and flying forever. So it's very short takeoff and landing. And I think this is actually, you might find this pictures from here are just great. So this is the luggage system for the Beaver. You put your packs in this little hand cart that somebody pulls over to the plane. This is my daughter here. This is the fuel system. They have this tank that they put it in. The plane comes up to this dock. So for those of us who are used to O'Hare, this is a very interesting thing. It's aviation at its most basic. So we're about to get on the plane. None of this nonsense with TSA or any of this other stuff. The plane comes in, they open the door, and you get on. That's my daughter. Here's the other people, the people getting on. Now, my daughter wanted to know, hey, can she sit next to the pilot? And I said, I don't know, I'll ask. So I asked the pilot, and he said, sure. None of this stuff was staying out of the cockpit. So she is not the co-pilot. She's just another passenger. Everyone's climbing into this thing. And off we go. We're now leaving the Keweenaw Peninsula, and you can see the Keweenaw itself is pretty much forested. And now we're going to head out over the lake. And after about 15, 20 minutes, we get to the lake. So we're now circling to land. So this is Rock Harbor. The visitor center and marina are here. The lodge is here. Some other facilities are here. And this is the next one behind it is called Tobin Harbor. So you can see these are, again, this set of ridge. Those are the flows like the deck of cards. So the plane is going to go here, and then he's going to turn and come down and land right around here. And technically, the plane is not allowed to give sightseeing tours, what they call flight seeing tours of the island. But you see most of it just in the process of getting there to land there. So the plane is now turning to land, lining up to come into Tobin Harbor. It's about to land. And we're landing. Any of you that are really serious United Airlines flyers probably have the line memorized, in the unlikely event of a water landing, then your life jacket is beneath your seat and so on. Well, here, of course, you're guaranteed a water landing. So the plane is landing. You can see the water splashing around the pontoons as we land. And those pontoons are the luggage racks, are the luggage hold. So then the pilot gets out and he opens up the pontoon and starts passing your stuff out. So you're restricted into the amount of stuff you can take because it has to fit inside the pontoon of the plane. Okay, so now this is how you get off the plane. This is the jetway. You get out of the plane and you stand on this dock. They give you your stuff. That's me getting my pack on. And then you walk down the dock and you're on land. You pick them up and you pack them out. Then we go to the visitor center. We were going to be backpacking, so we had to go get permits and also your last dosage of junk food. Because any candy or munchies you want for our next 4 days, we have to buy them here. You get permits and whatnot. They also do a very cute thing. There's a big scale there. So you can put your pack on the scale and decide, do I really need that stuff? A good cheat is to weigh the pack before you put your water in there, because every quart of water is 4 pounds. But it makes you. This is a really sobering experience. From this, if you want it, a good thing to do is also to do this before you go in and buy junk food, because then if any junk food you add will go into your pack, and then you've got it. Fortunately, I benefited from my daughter after graduating from New Trier, hiked the Appalachian Trail, which is the 2,000-mile trail from Maine to Georgia. And when you do that, after those 2,000 miles, you get really good at cutting weight out. So I was pretty good at getting my gear down, and Rachel went through it. And, oh, Daddy, you don't need that. And Daddy, we can do better than that. And Daddy, nobody uses that anymore. And that was very helpful. So we're off. Oh, no, I guess we take our photo picture here. That's Rachel. That's me. And, you're stalling for a while to avoid putting your pack on, but you can only stall so long before you just have to pick it up and do it. So we started down the Tobin Harbor Trail. And this is what a lot of the Isle Royale trails look like. The beautiful water over there. We're far enough north, so the forest is all boreal. It's all pines, spruce and pine mostly. We're now steading off toward Mount Franklin. So that's, a lot of times you'll see the back of me, where the red pack is me. So these are my camp shoes, which are Crocs up here, and all this junk on the outside of my pack, crap, that everything. We're heading along the trail. They've bridged some of the wet parts, which is nice. And now we're starting up Mount Franklin. I'll tell you the story of Mount Franklin when we get there. What's nice is the Isle Royale, everywhere you go, as soon as you get a little above the top of the lowest trees, you get great lake views. So here we are. So we're at the top of Mount Franklin on the Greenstone Ridge. In the distance is Canada. The island is actually closer to Canada than it is in the US. Now, the story goes that Benjamin Franklin was the US lead negotiator for the Treaty of Paris. And Benjamin Franklin was an incredibly smart guy. And the story goes that he said, can we have that island over there? Because he had heard that there were big copper deposits there. British negotiators, some island, you want the island, you can have it, So we ended up with this island, even though it's closer to Canada than the US. There's no historical evidence for the story, apparently, that Benjamin Franklin was behind this, but it's widely believed to be true. So this this peak is called Mount Franklin. And probably it could easily be true. Okay. Okay, now we're going down. Remember I mentioned the south-facing slopes are nice, smooth walk-ups. The north-facing slopes get a little soggy because they're steeper. This was probably the yuckiest piece we hit. It wasn't that long, but it felt long on our way to Lane Cove. Eventually, we made it to Lane Cove on the other side of the island. So this is the north side of the island. All the campsites are just fantastic. So this is our campsite set up. Putting together some hot drinks for dinner. Rachel didn't like the way some of our tent pillows felt that were fitting together. So after her time on the Appalachian Trail, Rachel said, I'll just take them apart and fix them, which she's busily doing there. What else can you see here? You can see our junk strewn all over the place. You can see we were wearing Crocs for in-camp shoes because you can also use them in water. One nice thing compared to many places where one backpacks is there are no bears on Isle Royale. The number of animals is very restricted, okay? Because most animals got there by coming across the ice in the winter. So there's wolves, a few, there's moose, there's some. No bears, essentially no dangerous animals unless you annoy them. So we're working for that. And the sunsets are just fantastic. So we're sitting there looking north. Now, what's interesting about Lane Cove is it's on the water. So you can also get there rather than walking there. You can get there in your boat. And we didn't that night, but often you'll meet people, or sometimes you meet people that have come over in their boats and spending the night on land here. So the next day we're going back over the south spine of the island. We're going up the top of it. So here again, we were camped there. We're now going to go up to the top. We're having lunch here, so our junk is spread out here. In our family, we call this taking a bear break, where you stretch out in the warm sun after you've eaten. If you're a bear, you you get something to eat. And once you had something to eat, you sleep in the sun until it's time to go find something else to eat. So it's me taking a bear break out over the Lake Superior, sort of siesta. And then we headed out along the Greenstone Ridge. This is mid-September, but you can see things are already starting to change colors because we're pretty far north. This is the trail along the ridge itself. And what's great is on one side, you see the south side, the other, you see water on the north side, and you're walking along the spine here. This is a lookout fire tower. It's not actually used for anything anymore, but they left it up there. You can go up it and get even better views. And when you get up there, you realize how big the island is. You know, you think we've been hiking for 2 days, and you look out there and there's like 4 days more worth of hiking to do if you were to get to the other end. This time we were going back to Rock Harbor, so we didn't do that. This is the view to the south. The last one was the north. Again, you can see the ridges. We went down to a place called Daisy Farm, and we were going to do some more exploring there. It was fun. The Michigan Tech has a research boat, and their boat was here. I'd been on that boat a year or two before, so it was fun to talk to those guys. But other people can come by boat. It turned out then a storm that was coming up from the south. It was the tail end of a hurricane that hit in the Gulf, came across Chicago, dumped a lot of water, ended up there, gave us torrential rain for a day and a half. So we just hung out there. It didn't. But then the storm moved out, and we headed back home. This is the Rock Harbor Trail, which is probably the prettiest trail on the island, or one of them. And you don't have to do this overnight. This can also be done just walking from the lodge and walking back. Saw some impressive beaver work. Those, see the beaver, like here, the beavers will go after even fairly big trees and get them down to see where the beavers chewed through it. This is a picture of the mine I showed you earlier. Just impressive what those guys were able to do. Now we're hiking our way out over this stuff, and we get back to Rock Harbor. Even quieter than when we went out, because it's now after Labor Day and everything is closing down for the season. So you can't even get junk food anymore. The only thing that's open is the ranger station. So it says closed for the season. We'll see you next year. No one expected the pandemic at the time. So in fact, this was closed, I think, for the summer of 2019. And it reopened last summer. So this is all closed. For those of you who are used to hitting the United Club at O'Hare or equivalent, this is the equivalent of the United Club. It's a piece of grass that you stretch out on, and you spread out all your wet stuff. This is a pretty good analysis of everything that was in Rachel's pack, because after a couple of days, everything's kind of dirty and grubby, and you stretch out in the sun hats or hiking boots. There's lots and lots of pairs of socks, hats, food bag, and you just wait for the plane to show up. When it shows up, here's the gate area. You walk back down there, here's the dock, go to the plane, and, pilot says, hey, everybody here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, everybody on board, let's go. So, it's that, O'Hare, we're used to planes leaving an hour and a half late. Here we left like 20 minutes early. Everybody was there, so we flew out. The pilot counted the people. So we're off, leaving Isle Royale. Great view of the sun. Google Maps turned out to work quite well on our phones. We were close enough to land, so Google Maps is showing us, we're over the water here, halfway between Isle Royale and the Keweenaw. So we were very impressed that it worked so nicely. So here we're coming into Houghton again. I saved these pictures so you can see what the town looks like from the air. Pilot is more or less lining up on the lift bridge here. He's going to fly over the bridge and then land just past it. So we're heading west. Again, so Houghton is here. Hancock is here. Over here is some of the famous historic mines in Hancock. Here's like the main part of Houghton, downtown district. Just past it is Michigan Tech. And this is the National Park headquarters, visitor center. And this is the National Park Ferry, the Ranger. It's bigger boat, but it takes longer to get to Isle Royale. It's like a 6-hour ride instead of a 3-hour ride, but it's certainly going to be more stable. It's the visitor center. Those are Michigan Tech dorms. This is just stuff in downtown Houghton. This is a hotel. This restaurant gives you a great view of the river. And we landed. So they're going to drive right up to the place where the other seaplane is, and then we'll all get out. Our car's parked over here somewhere. more info if you're interested. My wife and I did a video about the Mid-Continent Rift and our research in it. And you can find it on YouTube. Just look for Lake Superior and the Mid-Continent Rift billion-year story. In fact, last time I showed that when I was here, if any of you were at that presentation a couple of years back, I didn't want to do the same thing again in case someone had seen it, so that one. But this thing's easily accessible. There's a lot, and stop here. There's lots more stuff out there. I recommend going there. You absolutely do not have to backpack to enjoy the place. You can easily just do it walking out of your lodge room for an hour or two walk. The one thing I will warn you is it's incredibly popular. So usually people make reservations like the summer before. You know, if you were to try to make reservations this summer, you wouldn't get in. Okay. Because you need two sets of reservations. You need to find a place to stay, and you need reservations on either boat or plane to go there. So the Park Service we were talking to the superintendent, and she said, well, they're embarrassed that they get very few visitors. I mean, they get less visitors in the whole year than you'd get for like a day in Yosemite or Yellowstone. But she said it's the most revisited national park in the system. Once people go there, they really just like going there, and they just keep going there. So on that note, I will stop, and happy to answer questions or take comments. Anything else.
Seth, that was
How do you want to
terrific.
do that?
We're going to handle it this way, Seth. We have a big audience on Zoom, but we first want to take our questions from the auditorium. So we're going to turn it over to the auditorium first. And when those questions are answered, I can cover them for you from the ones we've received from Zoom. So go ahead.
I'll leave you in charge then. That makes it easy for me. So thank you.
You can take down the screen share when you're ready.
Okay, well, people might want it, so I can pop back. I'll leave it up.
That'd be fine. That'd be fine. You can leave it up.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
People want to see. Yeah.
Hey, Ron, we got questions here.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you for sharing that wonderful story. I visited Isle Royale to celebrate my 8th birthday. The year was 1938, and I have very strong memories and pictures from my Brownie camera that are in black and white that show where we stayed, the family that ran the little camp. It was the Johnson family. They had 3 sons. The eldest one was the guide. The youngest one, who was 11, was a big flirt. And obviously he didn't have enough females around, so he flirted with an 8-year-old. Anyway, it was very delightful, and I thank you so much.
Well, one of the things that perhaps the biggest cultural change in my career in the outdoors is the number of women doing this stuff now. So now, you'll meet parties of 4 women together on a trail or something. And so as you saw, my daughter, I'm pretty short. The daughter is 5'2" when she's humping all this stuff, but that's wonderful to hear. That is so great. And it's still and they've kept it. Most of it would look exactly the same as when you were there. That I think is so fantastic. And it's a tribute to the Park Service and tribute to all of us.
Don?
Okay, I enjoyed the presentation too. It was really terrific. I'm interested a little bit more in the animals. And I wonder why the bears don't come over. And are the wolves and you said moose were there, but
yeah. Here's my guess. I'm not a biologist, but here's my guess. The moose and the wolves came over the ice in the winter. Okay. And in fact, one of the problems is that as their gene pool isn't refreshing. So some of you may have seen pictures last year, the Park Service captured a bunch of wolves on land and transported them out to Isle Royale in the middle of the winter. Now, presumably the bears are sleeping in the winter. The bears are good swimmers, but they're not going to swim 20 miles to Isle Royale. So the bears, when it's easy to get out to Isle Royale, if you don't mind the cold, which bears don't. Similarly, there are no deer, interestingly enough. It's a very interesting set of species that you get. So what happened is we had a very good lecture by the wolf researchers. There's a group from Michigan Tech that's been studying the wolves and the moose and how they interact. Because of course, if there aren't enough wolves, the moose overgraze. If there are too many wolves, it would hurt the moose population. They sort of stay in balance. But what happened is for the last couple of years, the wolves population's been dying off because of, their inbreeding. That's related to as the climate warms, the lake doesn't freeze over as often, and the supply of new wolves doesn't get as large. So they actually, when the wolves they took over, they captured them in 3 different places, and then they brought them over to like increase genetic diversity. And I'm told the wolves are doing just fine. There's also another great YouTube video. I don't remember the name of it, but if you type, transport wolves to Isle Royale or something, you can see great pictures of these guys, the vets going out with tranquilizer guns and shooting these wolves. And then they take them in and they give them a physical and dental work and so on. And then they transport them over to helicopter to Isle Royale.
Arnie Oskin here. I would fly out to Houghton to the Navy surveillance base up there in the Upper Peninsula, and they would only allow us to fly during 4 months during the summer to go to the base to do training, because I worked for the U.S. Navy at the time.
For the ELF facility when they were building? Yeah.
Right, the EMF satellite scanning facility up there on the UP. And I was amazed that the flight was like, it would be more costly to fly from Chicago to there than it would be to fly from New York to San Francisco. I mean, it was a very expensive flight.
Still true. And in fact, it's expensive to fly to Houghton, and and I think Michigan Tech is subsidizing it so they have any air service at all. Okay. You can do it from Chicago, and you can also do it from Minneapolis, but it's not cheap.
It's very expensive.
Yeah, still is. I mean, it's like outside. I mean, there aren't a whole lot of reasons why anybody would want to go to the Keweenaw. And the state of Michigan keeps trying to think of ways to promote economic development in the Keweenaw, but outside of tourism, it's really hard to think of any reason why anybody would want to go there today. Tourist industry works reasonably well, but it's like 3 months of the year. I mean, I was up there first day of May one year, and they had like 24 inches of new snow, and people were shoveling it off their roofs.
Hi, I'm sorry you didn't talk a little bit about Wendigo, but I understand limited time.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
boated in to Wendigo on what was then called the barf barge. Not sure it still is. It's a faster boat ride than the one from Copper Harbor. And you mentioned the waves. And so indeed, it is possible to become quite ill. In Wendigo, I wanted to say for those who would like to do that, you can boat there and do a day hike, be a day tripper and go back. So that's another option, or at least it was.
It is. Let me just put. This is why I left the slides up, because I thought there might be something people would want to see. This might help on that. If I was smart, I could get to the beginning quickly, but I just want to show people that what we were told was absolutely correct. Yeah, there we are. Basically, the point is from Grand Portage to Wendigo is a heck of a lot closer than Keweenaw to inside. Now, from Chicago, you still have to get yourself up here.
Yes.
Okay? That's pretty much an extra day's here. Basically, Chicago to Duluth is a longish day's drive, but perfectly doable. And then you have to get yourself up here, which is about a half day, but still lots of good tourism. But then again, you do have the trip to the island is much nicer to get to Wendigo. So thanks for reminding me of that. My daughter and I are this summer, we're gonna fly to Wendigo, hike the length of the island, and then fly back from Rock Harbor.
Anyway, thank you very much. It was very enjoyable.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and it's great. Thanks for reminding me about Wendigo. By the way, of the two Nevada bar novels I said, the first one is set in Rock Harbor area, okay, and the second one is set in Wendigo. So you get her take on both of them. They're wonderful books. If you've not read any of her books, they're all fantastic. But the great thing is she's described as a former park ranger, and I had a feeling the Park Service may not have appreciated the portrayal of some of their people in her stories. Any more?
Yeah, two more questions here.
This is a comment. A friend of mine went to Michigan Tech University. He said by second semester, you could walk out the second floor windows. There was so much snow. And that, but
We have a
Michigan
question.
Tech had a really important influence on Chicago. For those of you who don't know, before becoming the Blackhawks,
Arnie right there.
Tony Esposito was an All-American goalie for Michigan Tech, which is a perennial hockey power in the U.S. A lot of times, but that's funny though. Yeah, people said you either really love it or you get totally tired of it, the snow.
Hi, thanks for the overview of this beautiful island. Did you have any experience with seeing especially great night skies or northern lights?
We didn't get northern lights. We had wonderful clear skies our first night, and then that storm blew in. And so for the next 2 nights, we did not have good stars. When my wife and I were staying at the lodge, we actually had very good stars, that we could just walk slightly to the north. I've never managed to time it for seeing northern lights. Okay.
Ron, it's your turn.
Thank you, Fred. And a terrific presentation. And you've answered some of our questions, Seth. One that we first started with was, when did Native Americans first inhabit the island? How did they get there, given it was more than 6,000 years ago?
We assume they got there in boats. I mean, it's hard to see how else they could have gotten there. Although they could in theory have walked over in the winter, which would also be perfectly possible. We assume boats. We don't know what do we really know? We don't actually have artifacts from the Indians, so we don't know if they lived there year round and fished and stuff, or they just came over occasionally. We know they mined, and the story is basically this: in order to smelt the copper, to get the copper out in a form that it's useful, you do various things to it. And so when people have looked at sediment cores off the island, this was utterly amazing. You could actually see the geochemical signature of the mining. So that's where this 4,500 BC came from. Everyone was absolutely blown away at that. People had no idea. They knew that. I mean, when white people first got there, the Indians were there and knew their way around, but we had no idea when they settled. So we know they were there at least 4,500 years ago, 4,500 BC, so 6,000 years ago. It might have been there longer. Okay. And short of assuming they got there in boats, I mean, they, which is unusual because the Indians were very careful. They got everywhere, including Chicago, of course. They got everywhere by boat, but they usually didn't go off into the middle of bodies of water. The Indians were careful to travel along the shore very wisely. So, but you can see it. You can see Isle Royale at least from peaks on land. So maybe that's how they knew about it, or we really don't know. And I'm not sure. I have not seen an account in any tribal culture as to how they did it, but then I've never looked seriously for it. Maybe it's known and I just don't know it. Okay.
Here's one in your wheelhouse, though. David Waterman is asking this: when was the last visible volcanic activity, and are there any earthquake epicenters there?
No earthquakes. Volcanism ended about 1 billion years ago. Okay. No earthquakes.
All right, here's a more practical question from Tom. How many miles did you walk, and could you fish while you were there?
Yes, you absolutely can fish. There's actually quite good fishing, and a lot of people do fish. Okay, it's just, you need a Michigan fishing license. That's about the only requirement. Because the state, it's bizarrely, this is in the state of Michigan, even though it's closer to Minnesota. We did not fish, but you can. We were doing about 8-mile days, but we weren't pushing to go very hard. We were just relaxing and enjoying the views and so on. You can do, we're planning to do the length of the island in about 6 days. So those would be, 8 to 10 mile days. But if you want to bust ass, you can do more. We were not busting ass. I'll be more honest than usual since I'm talking to a senior center. My daughter is relatively understanding about these things. I mean, this is many years ago. I carried her gear and she carried her teddy bear in her backpack. And now we've moved to the state with, oh, Daddy, I'll take that. And Daddy, I'll take that. You know, I'll take the tent, Daddy, you know. So she was accommodating me.
Okay. I had put a facetious question there about what kind of wildlife was there other than the Northwestern professor, but you answered that. But let me ask it another way. Did bugs make it out there? Mosquitoes?
Yes, we chose to go at a time to avoid them. Okay, we went as the commercial services on the island closed a little after Labor Day, and then there's about another couple of weeks you can still get out there by boats. And then at some point, I think it's like October, middle of October or something, they just closed the island. So we went there at a time when the bugs would be way down. We had almost no problems with them. I mean, we had one of those wet, soggy trails. We had a few bug bites, but almost all the time we didn't. Up on the ridge, we had good wind blowing, so we had no bug problems. But if you were to go there in June, I think you would have serious bug problems.
I have one comment that I would like to read to the group, and then one last question. The comment comes from Jill from Lifelong Learning in response to, is this being recorded? And the answer is the presentation is being recorded. You're gracious enough to have allowed that, Seth. It will go to Glenview Television today for processing. They will send it to Lifelong Learning staff in approximately 3 weeks. They air it always on Glenview Television, but it will be sent to the staff in approximately 3 weeks. Then it will be, let me skip this around, then it'll be uploaded to the North Shore Senior Center website for all to enjoy. So we definitely can enjoy it and tell our friends to enjoy it. And the last question I have is it senior friendly enough that those that may be challenged thinking, hey, can I make this? Can I do it? What's your feeling about that? Is it for those of us old enough or just for our grandkids?
I think it depends. Here would be, I put it, if you will, once you get out of the immediate area of the lodge, you are on trails. They are not horrendous trails, but they are trails. You can do it as a day walk, but I mean, so I would say if you have mobility issues, it probably would not be a good idea. But you do not have to get out there and backpack. You do not have to hump large loads. You can eat your meals at the lodge, and they can pick up snacks to take on the trail. So I would not say that you would.
So active seniors would have could take a look at it.
Yeah, active seniors would make sense. I mean, obviously, and just you don't have to backpack. I mean, the lodge is a perfectly nice place. That would, and it's not luxurious, but the views are fantastic. And so I would recommend it for active seniors. Okay, if you'd be comfortable, the trail will be more challenging than just like a forest preserve walk around here, which is flat. If you saw like, I'm trying to give you a sense. Sorry, let me just jump through. I want to just show you a trail picture to give you a sense of what we're talking about. And, it depends on what you're comfortable with. Oh yeah, okay, here. So, what am I walking on here? Something like that. Okay, I'm on a trail. But sometimes you have to go over rocks, sometimes not. So I mean, obviously you don't have. There's no reason to be humping a backpack. You don't want to. But that's the kind of the criteria I would use. Lodge is nice. Boat rides are, again, if you can either do the boat ride or the plane, whichever it is, depending on, if you really get boat sick, then I would probably do the plane, or the bigger boat. But no, I mean, you certainly meet seniors there who seem to be having a very good time.
Terrific. Thank you, Seth. We're done with our questions from Zoom. I'm going to turn it back to the Fred in the auditorium.
Okay, Seth, thank you ever so much.
Okay, my pleasure.